and can find his way back.
And
yeah, I noticed he left.
We lost him.
He'll be back, I'm sure. Okay, hold on. I'm going to bring up this page. Okay, someone, like every week, want to give us a quick synopsis of the Lance Armstrong case? Which, by the way, I didn't realize how such of a crappy person he was. I mean, I knew about the scandal, but...
I think they did a good job covering up a lot of the details in the news. Or at least from my memory. Like, I don't remember a lot of these details.
True.
So does anyone want to give us a synopsis?
I can do it. I just feel like you guys get tired of hearing me talk.
No, go
Never.
for it.
That's good. That's why it's good that our meetings are short. So Lance Armstrong obviously was a very well-known athlete. He won the Tour de France 7 years straight, I think, which was unheard of. And there were several accusations over the years that he had been cheating, and he denied them, very strongly denied them. Not only did he deny them, he basically badmouthed anybody who had the audacity to accuse him of doing something wrong. And so basically over time, it came to light how not only that he was cheating, but basically they had developed this huge system of cheating, and he'd gotten anybody that worked with him to cheat him. Like, you couldn't be on his team without cheating.
Yeah.
And not only that, but if you were on his team, not only did you have to cheat, but you basically had to give up your whole career, basically, so he could keep winning, is kind of what I got out of it. And then anyway, once he couldn't hide it anymore, he finally came forward and admitted to it, and everything was taken away from him. All of his sponsorships, all of his titles were taken away from him. Basically kind of disgraced himself when he finally came out and admitted that everything was true. So is that enough detail? Do we need to go into any of the details right now, or is that okay?
I think that's good. Okay. So what do you guys think? I mean, the questions for this week on the discussion are pretty much the same that was on our activity. So what do you guys think that Armstrong's legacy was?
He cheated.
Yeah.
He cheated.
Like, I feel like he kind of lost everything.
Yeah,
Like,
well, and I think if you ask any kid, like, who's Lance Armstrong, they'll say, oh, it's that guy that won all that stuff and then failed because he cheated the whole time. Like, he's the guy that doped up. Like, that's what people know him as now.
Yeah.
I think.
The crazy thing is his body had a disposition to be better than anybody else's anyways, because it didn't produce lactic acid, and it still was better than anybody's to begin with, and he cheated on top of that. So if he probably would have focused and worked hard like everybody else did, he probably still would have won, but he just did it the wrong way.
Yeah. And I thought it was interesting how it said that 20 out of the first 21st finishers were all blood doping. You know, so it's kind of like, and they always claimed, oh, it wasn't cheating, no, it wasn't cheating. And you kind of think in a way to justify it for them. Well, it kind of wasn't, because everyone else was doing it too. Not to make that right, but it's not like he wasn't putting himself on an unlevel playing field if everyone else was also doing it.
That's the problem, though, is it ruined the whole sport, right? I mean,
yeah.
I mean, either you had to cheat or you couldn't compete, and that's what's the most heartbreaking thing about it, is everybody who competed in that sport at the time got cheated. So
yeah,
the Olympics are so filled with that. It's just funny how it just all came out, and maybe he was part of the pioneer that made it even worse. Who knows?
So Armstrong organized and led what was perhaps the most sophisticated and comprehensive cheating program in the history of sports. Who suffered from his cheating, and what were the costs?
I mean, I think everyone suffered. Because, I mean, like Nikki was saying, at that point, everyone had to cheat in order to win. Like, if you wanted to win, you had to cheat. And so anyone who wanted to even get in the top, 20 of the race had to cheat to get there. And so it ruined all of their lives. And then I think as well, fans and people who followed him and looked up to him, and that it screwed up a lot of them in that sense. And I mean, not only that, he was a huge icon for cancer awareness at that point, because he and that his foundation was just completely annihilated at that point. So I think there's a lot of tears on what happened because of stupid decisions.
Yeah. And I was thinking of like the people who had like the moral standing to not cheat, like who probably deserved to win the like 7 or so tournaments, and then like all the people like all the races before that he won that he probably didn't deserve, like the people who would have won if he hadn't been cheating. I don't know. I think they suffer too.
I wonder because it costs so much to cheat, to blood dope like that. So I wonder if the people that didn't cheat, if they didn't do it because they couldn't afford it or because they didn't think it was morally right.
And it was a lot of work.
That's just an interesting thing I would like to know. To do some kind of study. Do they just not cheat because they couldn't afford it because it was so expensive?
Right.
It's not like bikers make a lot of money.
Unless you win.
Unless you win.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of people, a lot of companies that pay him a lot of money to sponsor him, you know, and I think all of them kind of got a bad name. You know, they spent a lot of money to use him in their image to build their own brands. So I feel like they really got cheated as well.
Yeah.
They spend more money probably to recover from what happened than they did to get him on the team.
Yeah.
And like any of his coaches or like trainers or like basically anybody associated with him, like instead of being known as like a great coach or a great trainer after that, they're just like, oh, well, you were with the guy who was drugging himself.
Yeah. And his family too. That was another thing I mentioned. Like his poor family, like his wife, his kids, you know, like they're going to carry that around forever as well.
Yeah. Where am I? So when you guys have been in the workplace or you've been a leader or in that kind of situation, have you guys ever experienced a situation where someone was doing something wrong, and how did that make you guys feel?
I can start. So the first thing that came to my mind is actually one of my, it was like my second job that I ever had. And I was working as a receptionist at a resort spa. And essentially when people would come up after their services, sometimes they would leave the cash tip with us. And then we would go and we'd give that to the massage therapist. But the massage therapist didn't always know that they got that. And the girl who was training me I'd watch her, and sometimes she would slip that cash tip under her desk and never give it to the massage therapist. And they would disappear. And these tips are expensive because the massages are easily $200. Like it's a resort. And so 10% is like $20 right there. And a lot of times they'll do more than that. So if she did that with each therapist, each appointment, that's at least 8 hours in a day, 20 times 8. I mean, it builds up. And she would hide them. And so these therapists are thinking they're not getting tips. And she ended up getting fired from it. But it cost these people their livelihood because they don't get a lot of money outside. So it was just something that I saw a lot of there that affected a ton of people.
Does anyone else have another experience? All right. If not, we'll move on. So what do you guys think about, like, are there gray areas? And if there are, how do you choose correctly when you confront those gray areas?
I think that the gray areas, in my experience, it's not really a gray area of whether something's right or wrong. I think the gray area comes from when a situation is complicated, and sometimes it's hard to know what the best thing to do is. So I've certainly been in situations, especially in work situations, but sometimes outside of work as well, where you want to do the right thing, and sometimes it's just not cut and dry what the right thing is to do. I think especially kind of in our church relationships, because we kind of expect more out of those people, I think. And so when I've had like church leaders or people that I go to church with that don't act the way I think is correctly, sometimes that's been really hard for me to know What's the right thing to do here? So in my experience, that's where that gray area kind of comes from.
Yeah. Or like I wrote about in mine, it's just like when it affects your relationships with other people. Like if like me chastising that person will make me look judgmental or make them feel bad, you know, when it's like not that bad of a thing, or like if it's not provable, if it's just going to make me look like a snitch or something. And then I don't know, at least where Armstrong's concerned, I think the gray area could be what we talked about earlier about how he was like, everybody else is doing it, so like it's not that big of a deal type thing. So it's like, I don't know, in that case, I could see him getting wrapped up in it, but I don't know, like just thinking about how it affects other people.
Those gray areas are a slippery slope. Once you compromise your integrity, it's very easy, just like Armstrong did, where you can just end up clean into the black. There's no more, it just envelops you, and it's scary how quickly it happens. And I've seen that happen with different people I've worked with, where they made that one decision, oh, they got the biggest sale of the month or whatever, but they didn't quite do it. They gave them a case of beer on the back end or whatever. It's crazy things that happen. I do, but it's just funny how people take that gray area as much as possible far too often, and then they find themselves in trouble.
I thought it was interesting too that people who kind of are willing to kind of live in that gray area and kind of sacrifice their kind of their integrity on smaller things, they always seem to be the ones who will end up with bigger problems. And I thought that it was interesting in this Lance Armstrong case study that they talked about when he was a kid and he was competing and he was lying about his age. Because I thought, you know, at that age, he found benefit from lying and doing something that wasn't technically right. And even though you might hear that and think, oh, it's not a big deal, but look at later on in his life, he figured that he could benefit from kind of being dishonest. So I think sometimes people who won't choose the right in the small things are kind of on a slippery slope, like Jeff said.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Did you guys ever read that paper? I don't remember what class it was for, but it was like, we watched videos and stuff about this lady who ended up going to jail for like money laundering with a bunch of people from our company. And it all started with her like stealing the stapler and like keeping some paper clips and doing like little things in her office. And then she went on a business trip and everyone said, oh, we just charge it to the card anyways. It's fine. Everyone does it. And so then she started using money from the business that wasn't necessary and just kept doing it over and over again. And then like she had to pay back like millions of dollars and go to jail and lost her job and couldn't find a job anywhere. And it's like,
wasn't she pregnant too and didn't even get to see her kid, if I remember right? Some crazy thing like that. Sad story.
Yeah. It was really sad.
Yeah.
She like lost her marriage and all this kind of stuff, all because she started by stealing paper clips. You know, something tiny you don't think of because it's like 2 cents.
So I guess it kind of, we'll go into the next question where it says, how will you guys measure your success or measure your own life?
Well, I think it's important to, like he says in How Will You Measure Your Life, it's important to kind of have a strategy. You know, we don't necessarily always think of having a strategy for our life, but if we kind of have a strategy, then it means we've set a goal. And so we should measure ourselves to whether or not we've achieved that goal. And I think that if we sit back and think about our lives that perspective, our goals aren't necessarily going to be, oh, I want to make $1 million a year. You know, you're probably going to think more about, I want to have my family. I want to be able to do this with my family. I want to spend time with my family. I want to watch my kids grow up, kind of a thing. So I thought that was really good insight to just kind of put together a strategy for your life now and then try and follow that throughout your life.
Yeah.
Set those boundaries early.
Mm-hmm.
So something me and my husband do, and it's kind of different, but so we have this massive like blown up picture of the family proclamation to the world. It's really big, it's really cute, but it sits right by our dining room table. And it's big enough that when we're sitting at the table, we can read it. And just like at least once a week, we're sitting there and we just kind of glaze over it and just double check how we're doing according to what that says and how you're living your life. And that's really helped us, like, in our actions in life, to double check what we're doing and kind of check ourselves and be like, oh, we need to get back on track. We need to make sure we go to the temple more, or we need to make sure we're acting this way better, or stuff like that. That's really helped.
Definitely. All right, so that's all the questions. Does anyone have anything else that they would like to add?
Don't cheat.
Yeah, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
In the long run, you always get caught.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, I think he knew he didn't deserve it, right? Like everybody else gave him all of that. You know, he got a lot of money for it and he got a lot of praise for it. But I mean, he knew that he didn't really earn it. So how much real enjoyment could he have gotten from it? You know?
Yeah, the
But I
burden
wonder if
of
that's
always.
why he came back so, like, negatively against people who accused him.
Mm-hmm.
He, like, barked back at him and got mad at them because he knew they were right.
Yeah.
The wicked take the truth to be hard.
Plus, it was honestly just so much work. Like, it talked about him, like, smuggling drugs into, like, their trailers during the race, and then, like, all the blood transfusions and, like,
The bribes.
I don't know. The bribes, yeah, it was honestly just so much work, and he probably spent as much money as he made on that. Like, and then I just think he would feel bad afterwards, like how many other younger athletes' careers he corrupted because of that. Like he should have been someone to look up to for the younger athletes, and he probably was. And then they like get on his team and they're all excited, and he's like, yeah, so we're gonna do this, and if you're not okay with it, well, you know, it's just sad.
I think the biggest shocker to me was that he actually didn't feel bad for it. When Oprah Winfrey asked him, he felt like he said, I didn't cheat. You know, I think that's the biggest sign right there of his characteristics and his personality. That
Still defending what he was doing.
He had justified it so far and for so long that he still didn't think it was wrong.
So that's actually a trait of like a con man. So we'll delve into my past. So like my mom married a professional con man on accident, obviously. And they were married for years, but that's something the FBI said about him is essentially they convince themselves that their lies are the truth. And that's why they can lie so well, because in their head, they're telling the truth. And so a lot of times I think when people are feeling guilty and stuff for what they're doing, they convince themselves that what they're doing is right and that they're not guilty of doing anything wrong because they're doing an okay thing. And I think that's what he did, hoping that of denial.
And it's like, I could honestly see him telling himself, like, for the exact same reasons that, like I said before, the fact that he was a role model to so many people, I could see him using that as a reason to kind of keep it going. Like, he's like, oh, well, I can't lose now. You know, like, I have a lot of people counting on me. Like, a lot of people look up to me. You know, I don't know. That probably wasn't a help. Whereas in other situations, you think that would be a motivator to not do the wrong thing. In this case, it might have been.
Yeah. Okay, does anyone have anything else to add? Nothing?
No,
All right.
Pretty good. No.
Then I guess I'll see you guys next week. I'll post this tonight and I'll send you guys all the link.
Cool.
All right.
All right.
See you guys next week.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thanks.